This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast. This is where we talk college football, college basketball, NFL draft, NBA draft, really anything related to college football players and college basketball players. And today, Brandon, a jam-packed show. The NFL draft is gone. We don't have to focus on that anymore. That is now, if we're going to, it's an onside kick problem. It's not our problem anymore, unless we want to do our way too early big board, which, hey, we may do. Who knows? But we're talking college football. We're getting back into that realm today. We've also got a little NBA draft as we're gearing up May, and then June will be here before you know it, and the NBA draft. Talking Michigan football. Could this be the year for Jim Harbaugh? Should this be the year he's on the hot seat? Going to take a look at Texas A&M football. Jimbo Fisher coming in. What should the expectations kind of be for them? And then our NBA topic one, the show, is Mo Bamba. Is he the best big man in this draft? Should he be the first big man off the board? Kind of the discussion that we are going to have. But before we get into everything, a little bit of housekeeping. I'll keep it nice and crisp here at the beginning. Patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That's how you can be like our patrons, Patrick, Matt, Christian, Jake, who have come on podcasts in the past. We're going to have new patrons on this month for you guys to kind of see, kind of hear. You can be one of them on a podcast. Check out that link in the description. If you want an MVP t-shirt, the store link also down below in the description. You can check out mostvaluablepodcast.com. That's where you can catch everything for MVP each and every day. And last but not least, you're on your iTunes and Apple Podcasts. I keep wanting to say iPodcasts. It's not iPodcasts. It's iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Go and give the Primetime Podcast a 5-star rating. Mark and I almost said Sean and I. Mark and I looked at it earlier this week. Primetime Podcast has a good rating. However, there's that one stinky review that said we talked about SEC too much. I mean, it was that one podcast where everything in the SEC was going on, or it could have been our SEC preview, which is why it was all SEC. So go on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Write a good review so people know they should check out the Primetime Podcast and why Ricky can't say words correctly. But let's get into our first topic, Brandon. Let's talk Michigan football. Now, the question for today is, should Jim Harbaugh be on the hot seat for 2018? Because this is a team that hasn't lived up to the expectations that Michigan football fans want. He's never beaten Ohio State. They've never been to the college football playoff with Jim Harbaugh. However, Shea Patterson has been okayed to play this season. What do you think? Should Jim Harbaugh be on the hot seat this year or not?
I don't think so. I think it's a bit early. I think it's a bit premature to say that he should be on the hot seat. He's going to be in his 4th season at Michigan. First 2 seasons, he goes 10-3. And this past year, after he loses a lot of weapons, both offensively and defensively, I don't want to say and use that as an excuse, but it is a reality. He lost a lot of really key pieces on both sides of the football. So for them to go 8-4 during the regular season, they lose their bowl game. They have the last 2 seasons lost that bowl game, but for them to go 8-4 with what they had, I would say that that's pretty impressive. And I think that we can be assured, for the most part, that Michigan will rebound this next season. I think that we could be seeing a 10-3 again. But after this season, if they're unable to beat their rivals, the Michigan States, the Ohio States, if they can't beat them, then the questions are going to start to creep in. You know, is Jim Harbaugh the right guy for this job? Because, yes, Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. He's shown that. He showed that in his time at Stanford, especially towards the end, obviously, with that 12-1 season. Then he comes over to Michigan. He goes 10-3 in those first 2 years, and then 8-5, obviously, this past season. But if he cannot beat those teams, that's what's going to be held over him. As with the Chicago Bears, as an easy reference,
beat the Green Bay Packers.
Lovie Smith. 10-6, I believe, in his last season. But they fired him because they wanted more than 10-6. They wanted the playoffs, they wanted playoff wins, and they ultimately wanted to go back to the Super Bowl. But ever since then, they've only sucked. So I think that that's where you also have to be careful, because if you get rid of Jim Harbaugh, and I'm not saying Jim Harbaugh is the end-all, be-all, but you get rid of him, who are you going to bring in where you can honestly sell it to your program, for your program, to your players, to your fans, that we have now someone better than Jim Harbaugh guaranteed to beat Ohio State? And I think that's where you have to draw the line of being, okay, you want to get rid of this guy. The person you have lined up afterwards, they better be a whole lot of real good.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up that last point, because I feel like right now, it's kind of like a culture we live in now, to where if you start something, let's say, I'm going to relate it to going out and going to the bar to meet some girls. You got an outfit that's working for you. Well, if you talk to some ladies that night, it works. All right, I'm going to do that again next week. The second it stops working, I got to change that. Or let's say baseball. How many times it's like, you know what? I did this before I went up to bat and I got a hit. You know what? I'm going to do that again. The first time you don't get a hit, I got to change it. Something went wrong. I lost the mojo. That's where we're at right now with just as a society, is like, all right, we're not winning now. It's been 3 years. All right, we got to get someone in the door who can win. And it's reflected in Michigan, because since the last coach that they had that was there for more than 3 seasons, Lloyd Carr, he was there from 95 until 2007. Most of my life, Lloyd Carr had been the coach of the Michigan Wolverines. And then you've got Rich Rodriguez, took over in 2008, gone in 2010. Brady Hoke took over 2011, gone in 2014. Jim Harbaugh took over in 2015. Will he be done in 2018? And that is the question, because we're sitting around that year. He's past the, like, if we're looking on a graph, he's past the Rich Rod line. This year will be the Brady Hoke line. Well, basically how many years they were there. And I'm not saying that Jim Harbaugh definitely needs to go, but for me, I think that this is a year. Like, would I fire Jim Harbaugh right now? No. Would I fire them would I fire him after this season if they don't make the playoff? No. If they lose to Ohio State? No. However, with that being said, I think a little bit of pressure needs to be kind of put into Jim Harbaugh, not because I don't think he can make it to the playoff or beat Ohio State, but if I am in the AD's office, I got to be sitting there going, all right, I can't be happy with what is going on right now. The first time you play Ohio State, you lose 42-13. 2016, I'll give it to you. You go into Columbus, Ohio. You go into the Horseshoe, lose 30-27 in double overtime. Probably should have won that game. That was the one that had the questionable call that should have been Michigan, and I was on the side of Michigan, that they should have won that game. Then you have last year, you come back home, you lose 31-20. The two things that sit uneasy with me with those is that, first off, we're 0-3 against them. Second thing is that the close game was when we were there. We've given our fans 2 shit games when it's come to the outcome. They've basically blown us out here, although 11 points isn't the worst. This past year, the game was much closer on the road. The second thing that would sit kind of weird in my stomach right now is you're 1-2 against Michigan State. Like, he lost to Michigan State year 1, and then 2017, this last year, lost to Michigan State again. So that's another rival we're on the losing end of, and you didn't beat Penn State this year. Now, I know Penn State was the number 2 team in the country this year, but I see it and I go, all right, 2 losses in conference first year, 2 losses the next year, 4 losses now this year. When is this going to uptrend, or will this always be hey, there's always 2 teams, one of them being Ohio State, are going to clip us, and we're going to get losses for those games?
Well, I don't think that you can necessarily look at it like that. You have to, I think you have to look at it each individual season. So like this past year, you know, you look at how everything went. Okay, that's not how we wanted things to go, but you know, but it also can't just be it can't just be those games. You know, you have to look at everything as a whole, but there needs to come the time where they have to start winning against them. I don't think that Jim Harbaugh probably even is internally on the hot seat. I don't think it. But Michigan has seen 2 10-3 seasons. I can't stress that enough. They've seen them. They liked it. They thought that they could get more. They went 8-5. Now, if they don't start to trend back towards the 10-3, that's when we start to get worried. But when you do now have, and what this situation has worked out, what seems to be working out really well right now for Michigan, is that Shea Patterson, due to I don't want to say a loophole in the NCAA rules, but Michigan and Ole Miss are able to put a waiver together that they're both able to sign that says, yes, he can leave, he can go, he can be on your team. That's going to be really big for Michigan. Now, is it a complete set in stone that he's going to be the starting quarterback? No, not necessarily.
I think he wins the job, though.
I'm just saying, right now, nothing's set in stone. There's going to be, the off season where they're going to have competitions. They're going to have a quarterback competition, and the best one is going to win. The thought would probably be that he will be the one to do that, but I think you look at what he did last season for just 7 games with Ole Miss. Over 2,200 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's good. He's got an arm. I mean, he can really heave the ball around the yard. That's what Michigan needs. That's what they've lacked, I feel like, in recent years. They really haven't had. Certainly this past season, they did not have a strong quarterback. They did not have a strong quarterback really at any point during the season. And that's one of the things.
Wilton Spates or John O'Corn.
Exactly. They really lacked a true leader, I think, at the quarterback position. And Ricky, we've talked about this a number of times. The quarterback is your leader, and that's who you look to. That's who you look to be the one to carry you through a game, carry you through a rough spell, a rough patch. If you don't have that, that's going to be tough. So Shea Patterson is hopefully going to be able to be that guy, be that symbol for Michigan football moving forward. I think that Michigan certainly will be trending in the right direction this next season, especially after, again, I'm telling you, the 8-5 this past year, you're working with really tons of new players. I think, 22 new players, just on the defensive side?
Yeah.
They now have a year under their belt. That's good. They come into this season with more confidence, with, I think, a greater skill level, higher skill level than they had last year, and they're ready. They know what to expect, and they know how to go into battle and prepare for it. That's going to be the biggest thing for Michigan. Now they just have to be able to effectively execute.
Here's some of the things that I'm thinking could be good or bad. Shea Patterson, for me, is one of those where, to me, there will be either two guys that win, one of two guys that wins the job this year. It's either going to be Shea Patterson, the transfer from Ole Miss, or it's going to be the guy that we talked about before Shea Patterson got down to the line and choosing a school. They also are bringing in a freshman pro-style quarterback, Joe Milton, as well. Actually, that's where he brought up Milton, was when Patterson declared Michigan, we kind of had the discussion, would that then force Joe Milton to go somewhere else because he wants to start right away, but I think they'll compete for that job. One of those two guys is getting it, which should be an upgrade from either Spates or O'Corn from last year. The thing I look at, though, I think it's a favorable schedule for Michigan this year. I know we're early. We're basically in spring ball right now. Starting in June, both you and I are going to start our college football previews and go through all the Power Fives and look at every single team from the Power Fives. But just looking at Michigan's schedule right now, the only big games I would look at, so the worrisome games, I'll say, are Notre Dame's going to be a big one.
Game one.
Game one in Notre Dame. However, I'm not high on Notre Dame this season.
I don't know why you wouldn't be.
I
don't know why you wouldn't be.
I think that Michigan right now, I think I'd pick Michigan in that game. Ask me week 1 might be different, but I think Michigan can win that game. However, it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen, and we know that with Jim Harbaugh. Just look at what I said with Michigan State and Ohio State, how many games they've won there. 1. That's it. Then you look at the other ones. Nebraska to open up your Big Ten schedule. The reason why I bring that up, I brought up to talk about it today. We're going to shelf it for maybe next week or later podcast. Scott Frost coming in. What kind of an energy is he going to bring with that team? The quarterback situation's kind of a question mark, but that's going to be a big game to start your Big Ten schedule right there with Coach Frost and that Nebraska team. Then you've got Michigan State. That's going to be, to me, winnable, but the thing is you play them on the road this year. You are playing them in East Lansing, which is a little bit harder than playing them at home in the big house. Then you look at the last two. The last two big games for me. Number 1, Penn State. Yeah, they still got their quarterback coming back. Like, there's an article that I read today where ESPN was kind of taking some of the quarterbacks this year and comparing them to the quarterbacks that were just drafted in the NFL draft. And McSorley, or as I call him, McSworley, the way that they compared him was Baker Mayfield. And I looked at that, not as they play, I looked at it and went, holy crap, could you imagine if he had a season that Baker had last year? Watch out. However, I don't see that. They don't have Saquon Barkley anymore. The guy who, if you watch that Penn State-Michigan game, I wanted Michigan to win that one because I wanted Penn State to lose it. Saquon burned them. He burned them whether it was a handoff, whether it was a pass out of the backfield, Saquon Barkley burned them and was the reason they lost. He's not there anymore. He's with the New York Giants. And then the last one, Ohio State. The good and the bad with this. The good, Ohio State doesn't know who their starting quarterback is going to be. Last year, it was J.T. Barrett's our guy. They've got the leader at the quarterback position. This year, they don't know. The bad thing is, it's the last game of the year. So by the time you get there, whatever quarterback they pick will be established, and he will be the guy. It won't matter that they didn't know that coming in. So that's the good and the bad with that. However, it's not like last year where it was, hey, we got J.T. Barrett. Now, they do got little Bosa on that defense who could cause some havoc for Shea Patterson. But those are the 5 big games if you include Nebraska, that I'm kind of looking at that will be major turning points for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines this year.
Yeah, and they you didn't mention they have to play Ohio State on the road in the Horseshoe.
They play better at the Horseshoe with Jim Harbaugh.
But still.
Maybe that's a good thing.
But still, I mean, it's a road game against one of your toughest opponents to end the season. And usually at that point, at the end of the year, that last game, there's a lot on the line. And we've seen it with both of these teams, with Michigan and Ohio State. They both need it. So that's what makes it fun and exciting. But at the same time, there's usually a lot riding on that last game because they don't have it locked up already. But again, Michigan to me is going to have a better season this year. Now, could I be wrong? Sure, but I feel like Michigan will bounce back in a big way, and I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to bounce back in a big way, go to the playoff, but that's what Michigan needs right now. Is they've had Jim Harbaugh. They believed, we'll get Harbaugh, we'll get to the playoff. They haven't been. 3 years, no playoff appearance. Close, no cigar. They need to get there. And not necessarily for him to secure his job. I'm not saying that, but for him to almost secure a Michigan legacy because, yes, you've been better
Quiet the doubters.
Yes, you've been better than Brady Hoke. You've been better than Rich Rodriguez. Didn't take much. But I think that he needs to be able to do that for his own legacy. And now maybe he's not necessarily thinking about that, but I would. Because, yes, it's about being able to build a program, but you also want to be able to do well by yourself. And that's what he needs. That's what he needs for himself. That's what he needs for the fan base. That's what's going to keep Michigan football happy. And, again, they won it. It's been a long time. And, again, the 10-3, 2 seasons to start, good taste. Now you're down to 8-5. If there's anything less than 8-5, then we're going to start hearing the hollers of, is Jim Harbaugh really the right guy?
Well, and the thing just to throw out there, you said it shouldn't take much. Yes, overall and conference-wise, Jim Harbaugh has a better win percentage than both Rich Rod and Brady Hoke. But the thing, and take this as you may, when it comes to bowl games, he's got the same record as Brady Hoke.
I know.
1-2.
I know.
Here's the last two questions I got for you. So both of us agree that should Jim Harbaugh be on the hot seat this year? No. Like, although I think that maybe a little pressure should be there, like hey, Jim, we got to beat Ohio State this year. Just want to make that. I know you know that.
And I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I know you know that, but as an AD, I just want to make it known we got to do that this year. The first question I'm going to ask you, look into your crystal ball May 3rd next year. What would it take this year for you to think, not think about putting Jim Harbaugh on the hot seat for 2019?
Losses to Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State. If you got swept 0-3 against those, I'd start to think about it.
What would make you definitely put him on the hot seat for 2019? Would it be that same thing?
Oh, no,
or would it be more than that?
What was your first question?
I'm saying think. So it's like
what was your first question?
The first one was like
you asked the same question twice.
No. What I'm saying is here. I'll differentiate it. The first one is think. So kind of like what we're asking right now, where it's like, yeah, I'm not really putting him on the hot seat, but I'm sitting back privately in my office as the AD, and I'm thinking about it. That's the first one. Not publicly going, yeah, he's on the hot seat, but behind closed doors thinking I might put him on the hot seat this year.
Well,
Whereas
think
the second question is you publicly come out and say Jim Harbaugh's on the hot seat.
I don't know if you ever really want to publicly come out and say that your coach is on the hot seat necessarily. I think those things should be kept internal for the sake of the players so they don't have a distraction. So if I was the AD, I wouldn't be publicly saying anything. But I think that if Michigan comes out game 1 against Notre Dame and they get blown out, I'm already kind of thinking, are we ready? Are we ready this season? Are we going to be going anywhere? And again, now maybe they come out and they do lose to Notre Dame, but if you come out and you get blown out, that's where I'd already start to question. But the thing that would really make me internally
mad
put him on the hot
is if you lost to the
is
rivals.
If you're getting swept by all your rivals in one season. I'd be saying, well, that's never happening
and
again.
Technically, Penn State not a rival.
No,
but I would include them because when we talk about the Big Ten,
they're one of the top teams.
It's 3 teams. It's Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan are the 3 we talk about from the Big Ten Beast, not the East, the Beast.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, for me, I'm the same way. Like, I'll just simplify it. He's on the hot seat next year for me. If he loses, screw like all three of those games. Yeah, you are. If you have those 3 plus any more losses, you're on the hot seat. Hell, if you even lose to just 2 of those guys, I'd put you on the hot seat. Especially Ohio State's the big one because that's the thing where you brought up Lovie Smith and the Bears. The thing that Lovie Smith said that kind of got him canned in the end was his press conference. He came in and said, we're going to beat the Packers. And guess what? He didn't beat the Packers. Played them in the NFC Championship game, didn't beat the Packers. But that is something that when you don't have to say that as a Michigan coach. It is expected. That team can go 1 win the entire year, win against Ohio State. Those fans are cheering crazy because they beat Ohio State that year. So for me, you got to beat the rivals. The thing that I would then start to think about is, let's say, because for Michigan, it's weird. If they beat the rivals, they're going to be in the playoff hunt just because of where those teams are usually ranked. If Michigan, let's say, loses to Michigan State, I'm going to give you a specific situation here and then we'll move on. Let's say they lose to Michigan State, lose to Penn State, beat Ohio State, misses the playoffs. How are you sitting as the AD in Michigan? You beat Ohio State, but you lost to the other 2 and didn't make the playoffs.
Happy that they beat Ohio State, but the end goal ultimately is getting to the playoffs. So I'm 50-50. I'm 50-50 on that one. And again, I don't think that personally, it shouldn't necessarily be about beating any one team.
But you lose to one of those, you don't make the playoffs.
Could there be things in your contract that say, beat, so-and-so, if you beat so-and-so, you get a bonus, whatever? I don't know. But it should be more focused towards get to the playoff. I don't care how you do it. Just get there. And if Ohio State was your one loss and you still made the playoff, I don't care.
The interesting thing is, though, like the way this division and this conference usually works, if you want to get to the playoff, you got to beat those two teams, Penn State and Ohio State. You lose to either one of those, committee looks bad, boom, a second SEC team is going to get in over you sometimes. But I want to turn it on to you guys. What do you guys think? Should Jim Harbaugh be on the hot seat? Michigan fans, what is your kind of barometer right now coming out of spring into the summer as we get ready for college football season? You liking Jim Harbaugh's chances this year? You're kind of on the way out where it's like, get him out of town. Guy can't even beat the Buckeyes. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section.